S&P closes at a new high of the year. The Nasdaq is 4% off all-time highs. We'll explain what's driving the demand. Semiconductors trended sideways, but leading stocks such as Nvidia closed at all-time highs. We're going to talk about what's driving Nvidia. Tesla with earnings right around the corner, breaking its DTL. We're going to explain what the driver is. Netflix blowing off the actor strike and pushing into the gap. Microsoft closing at all-time highs. We'll explain the news that caused the stock to break out. Bitcoin rolling over and getting below some critical levels. We're going to discuss what this means. We have a lot to go over. Let's get to it. Hey everybody, welcome back. A lot to go over. You can see your higher, then you have the lower high. You make another high off that low, higher high, higher high. It's hard not to see this. And what we're starting to do is it's starting to become more and more obvious that we're going to continue to lift. I don't know how people are going to look at this chart, and I just put a 55 in so you can get an understanding of what we're looking at and not see that we're going to push higher. I think that you're starting to see rotation. I think that's a very good thing. We should talk about the day and exactly what happened here. You can just see in the middle of the day, you just have this lift here. Now, what caused this was pretty interesting. You had a couple things that drove it. Number one, you're starting to see the industrials break out a little bit here. You're starting to see that push, and we're continuing to see that push. And it's interesting for me because we're not really talking about what I think is just blatant, in my opinion, where you're just constantly hitting these higher lows over and over again, and you're constantly hitting these higher highs over and over again, and nobody's talking about it. There's only one real reason why industrials drive, and that's demand. Now, if we take a look here, and we just focus on that chart and that breakout, well, that's something. Now, we went over this on Saturday, and I'm bringing it up for a reason. If we take a look at this, that is a massive base. Massive. And one thing that we all know about bases, everybody should know this, even beginning traders, the bigger the base, the greater the breakout. You've been basing for over 2 years at this point. It's a 2-year base that you're breaking out of. To assume that this is the high is probably not realistic. Now, if we take a look at this and go, okay, well, that's not realistic. How do we profit from that? Well, we start drilling into the ideas. We start looking at the names. We start drilling into John Deere. We start seeing these flags breaking out. We see these channels that we had in. We actually talked about this a month ago. But you see it coming to fruition, starting to break out, not hitting higher highs yet. You start seeing Caterpillar. You start seeing Caterpillar head here, and we're starting to break out and do what? All-time highs. These are names that we start drilling into. Honeywell. That's not there yet, but we're getting there. We do have names that are moving that we should be paying attention to. Why didn't I mention Boeing? I stay away from Boeing just because of the 787, the Dreamliner. I just never know when that next new piece of information is going to come out. If I'm to look at these, I play Caterpillar. I think that makes the most sense. I think Deere makes the most sense. Now, the other driving force of all of this is the dollar. And the reason for that is U.S. goods, when they are bought overseas, if the dollar is weaker, then we are in a better position because our goods are cheaper to people that want to buy them. And we can see this very clearly right here, and this is the 55 on a weekly chart, but we can see that very clearly right here, and we can see how that is breaking down. That is not very difficult for anybody to see how there's that line there and that we are breaking down, and then all we're doing here is hitting what? Lower highs over and over again. As long as the dollar keeps dropping, a couple things. Conglomerates that are based in the U.S. will sell more goods. That actually even benefits Microsoft. You'll remember there were a couple quarters on Microsoft where we were actually coming down and then rallying into the conference call. And the reason for that is because they were explaining what was happening during the year when the dollar was super strong. And I'll show you this, where we had these movements such as here, and then they would explain why this happened, and then we were able to deal with it. Microsoft is one of those companies that does not hedge. When we see things like this, very simply, they're just not hedging. If they're not hedging, then they're exposed to risk. Back here in January 22, we had a strong dollar. So we'd see a lot of this on earnings where they would gap down and then it would gap back up after it was understood why. Now, if we have a weak dollar, that means that we're going to have conglomerates that are based in the U.S. have positive currency fluctuations when they convert back into U.S. dollars. And again, their goods are cheaper overseas. Now, we can see this clean breakout today. Very, very clean. We're going to talk about this. This is one we traded in the room and did exceptionally well with. And I'm going to take out the 55 right here and just go through this. This was as clear as day. These are the kinds of movements when you truly understand what drives a stock. This is how you can really outperform. And one of the key things that happened here, let's throw in some volume. One of the key things that happened here was this volume spike. Once you saw that volume spike, you knew something was going on. Now, you might not have known what it was, but as soon as you read it, if you understand fundamental analysis or have a basis of fundamental analysis, they are adding AI capabilities to their bundle of Office. Now, what this is going to do is relatively simple. It is going to increase that bundle $30 a month. To put this in perspective, people keep saying the consumer, the consumer. It's not the consumer. I'll give you a great example. Carnival Cruise has 92 ships. Out of those 92 ships, they have thousands of people that are on that ship. They all are using Office, Microsoft Office. All those people now are going to pay an extra, or that company is now going to pay an extra $30 a month per employee. Why are they going to do that? Because it's going to increase profitability. So when you understand that and you saw this move, you realize that they're already selling a product. They already have the technology. So this is just straight profit that goes to their bottom line. All they have to do is just keep replicating and sell it. They already have the technology. They're not doing anything more. Once you understood that, this made a lot of sense. So we got involved with it, and we did exceptionally well with the trade today, and we just let the trade work its way up, formed a flag, broke out, formed another little flag, broke out, and then you can kind of see right here where it starts getting a little sleepy. And then when it got a little sleepy, it was time to kind of get out of the way, and you could start seeing the upper wedge here. You start seeing these wedges, and this is a 9 EMA. I'm just leaving in there so you can see how that worked. But we did exceptionally well with this, and it's these little trades, and then connecting the dots is really where you can benefit. For example, one thing that people were really missing out on was, well, you're not going to be able to have all this unless you have chips. You need the right chips. There's only one company that makes the right chips. Okay, it's NVIDIA. I'm working on my pronunciation skills, guys. You're going to have to just deal with what it is. And I want to point this out to you because it gave us in the room like a huge edge, and I'll explain why. We know that you need these chips. Okay, so here you are at 1135. Look at when we start breaking out here, and you can just drop in VWAP there, and you can see it clear as day at 1135. So once this news is understood, look at where this move takes place at 1130. You had a full 5 minutes to watch this and see how it was going to act beforehand. And then as soon as it caught on, boom, ripped, and it just gave us another great entry. And this has been a huge winner for us. Something I actually owned overnight, opened up, gapped up for us. We've been playing around with it for some time, and we've done very, very well. You know, the one thing I always hear about this from the bears that are out there and that comment is that I need to wait because there's going to be this pullback. I want to be real clear about this. Nobody knows what's even going to happen tomorrow, let alone when this pullback's coming. All I can do is trade and then use money management principles to pull money out of the market. That's all I can do. And I have to look for when I have an edge. And I've been doing this a while, so when I have an edge, I strike. It's that simple. And as you do it more and more, you'll develop an edge. There's a huge disconnect between what's going on with NVIDIA and what is going on with AMD. Now, AMD is trying to hold in here, but even Bank of America came out and downgraded AMD and upgraded NVIDIA because NVIDIA is going to basically be the 800-pound gorilla. I saw this happen before. I watched this happen in the mid to late 90s, and essentially what it was Intel, Intel, Intel. It's going to be like that with NVIDIA. Just keep that in mind as we go forward. Now, if we take a look at Microsoft, so what's next for Microsoft? Well, they're going to be explaining all this on a conference call Tuesday, July 25th, it looks like. And this is not small news, guys. I just want to be really clear about that. This is really big news. It is not the consumer. Again, I don't care about the consumer. I don't care if you use Google Bard or ChatGPT, but if you think Carnival Cruise is going to get their employees to operate at a higher rate, but then the other cruise lines are not going to, you're mistaken. And that's going to be every single business that's going to do it. Adapt or die. It's really that simple. Companies like Microsoft, CRM, AWS, Google, they're going to bolt on these services and charge corporations. That's where the profit is. So just understand that. Winners win, losers lose, and that's what we're seeing here pretty succinctly. This was something we actually played with today, shorted, bought some puts on it, did quite well. Names like APLS, when these miss earnings or they miss a key driver. In other words, they'd miss earnings because no one's buying that new drug that they were so excited to come out with, there's no coming back from it. When your main drug blows up, like this one blew up, you're toast. It's back to the drawing board, and it takes years and years for that to come back. And the people that are in this realize that. So all they're going to do is try to save what they have and rebuild. I don't think this is over, and I do think that you can get down to this 33 fairly easy, and I would be paying attention to this. Just like that, also, BBIO is another one that we traded today, and you're going to see this wick here. Now, I'm showing you this for a couple reasons. Number one, we went over this in the pre-market. Every morning we do a pre-market live. Every single morning, roughly around 8:15 to 8:30 it starts. I try to start around 8:15. It usually starts around 8:30 by the time I get it all together and get all the information. But when you have these gap fills, and you come up here and you reject the gap fill, you just have to be aware of that area, and you have to understand that this is a point of interest. In other words, this is a spot where somebody sat for a very long period of time. Why did they sit here? Because it gapped down one day on them. So now they've been sitting in here for a year and a half, and now they're back. And they're saying, you know what? I've been in this year and a half, just get me out and I'll reevaluate. And that's exactly what happened here. And you can see that very clearly. Goldman had very positive notes on this. They think it's an M&A candidate. They're looking at a $50 target price. I find that very interesting. And all we saw was profit taking today. Sometimes the first time you try to get through, you don't. I would not rule this out. People are going to want to buy the winners and sell the losers, especially hedge funds right now. They are far, far behind where they should be. And you're seeing rotation, and we should talk about this. You're seeing names like AEHR, solid earnings, and then what are we saying? Let's just clean all this off and we'll redo it. All we did was go sideways today. Not every day is going to be up, as we keep talking about. We don't have $1.7 trillion in the market. We don't have that anymore. We don't have the Fed. So you have an inside day today. Not really a whole heck of a lot there that I would be concerned about unless I'm looking at just day trading it. But look at that on a weekly. It's really hard to not like. And we talked about this before, where you have these upper channels, and when you start flipping them, you want to pay attention to those because it can go parabolic. This has a lot of potential. I would not rule it out, but could you come back down? Absolutely. The market could come in. This could absolutely come in. If I was long this and I was concerned about it, I would just be using that low as a stop. And if I broke 50, maybe I get out of the way, because I understand that usually if you're going to gap fill, it happens in the first 11 days, and you might come down here and you may gap fill. My one outstanding concern that I have is Bitcoin. Bitcoin has been leading the NASDAQ, and now we're breaking down. Now, we could be breaking down because the government is supposedly selling some of the Silk Road that they have, some of the Bitcoin that they have, and you can see that right there. This is a 12 and a 22. We're unable to get over. We're unable to get over a critical level of 30,000. That's not great. I've got this RSI breaking a lower low. I'm kind of breaking the lower low here, but I don't really want to get below that 50. I really don't. And we're kind of heading that way. So that's a little bit of a disappointment and something that I'm watching. Now, this might present an opportunity if we go sideways and we really don't break that flag. I did find this interesting today because you had names like MSTR, which all we did was form these dojis on this flag. So we didn't close at the low. Maybe we're just working off the overbought. I don't have the answer yet, but I am watching these because maybe that's the case. If you remember, this was something that we bought a little bit ago, maybe a couple of weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. When we broke out of here, we actually were able to get in a little cheaper, like around that 340 level. And that was a really good move. And now what I like about that move is it just sets us up. Now you just stay out of the way and let it set up again. And once it sets up, then we'll go from there. But most important, you just protect your capital, you sit, you watch, you wait. But I do think that this has massive potential. I really do. And I don't think people truly get this one. I don't think they understand that the company is basically trading at zero, and all you're really getting is Bitcoin, and it's a company that makes $500 million or does $500 million in revenue a year. This also was fascinating today while we're on the topic. So we have Mara, and we have a trend line right here off the top of that doji. We flip that, and then let's get rid of this. And what do we do? Come with that 12 and sit and not break. Now, if we drill into this and just clean everything off and look at that chart, and you can see the support level very clearly here on Mara. You can see right here again. Now, Does this hold, and does past resistance stay support? We're about to find out. But that's a critical level, and it's definitely one that I would be paying attention to. And if I could hold here, if I can hold that level, and then if I could go here and then make a higher high, it's definitely something that I'd be paying attention to. So we'll go from there. I would not rule these out, but I want to see stability there. And Bitcoin is risk on. So in other words, what I mean by that is if Bitcoin's dropping and we can't find some kind of support, that becomes a concern of mine. Because people that are in Bitcoin and trade Bitcoin, they want risk. That's why they're buying Bitcoin. So keep that in mind. It's definitely something for us to pay attention to. I would also watch Microsoft again tomorrow. I want to be real clear about this. You're going to have all retail hear about this on the news today. Obviously, they get the news all day long. Their friends are going to be talking about it. Everyone's going to be talking about it. And then you're going to go into tomorrow and you're going to get the investment bankers that are going to change their models based upon it. So I would expect a lot of people to continue to talk about this. And the driver, which is NVIDIA, which what? Is now closing where? All-time highs again. So again, really hard to look at this and say, okay, well, it's over. I'm not that smart. I can't look at a chart and say that's the top no faster than I can look at the bottom. I can only come up with an assumption of where we're at, but nobody can look at that and say that's the top. It's actually looking at it with where we were on Friday, coming down, and then the next day forming this hammer. Told you pretty much everything you really needed to know about the next day. Forming that hammer, we gap up, reverse, flush, can't make the lower low. Wicks are price rejection. We all know that. We can see that really very clearly in there. And I think it's really important. I mean, you can see that wick and how we couldn't even stay there any longer. So when you start seeing things like that, and you start seeing up here how you start getting through that wick, I'd pay attention to that. I think it's very important. And I don't think that people are truly getting how underwater hedge funds are, and they're going to have to chase performance. Now you look at the SOX today, SOX is going sideways, and then you start going through some of these names. Well, there's some names this week, guys. You have Taiwan Semi coming out with earnings. This is going to be a big one. All right, this is going to be big Thursday. ASML coming out with earnings Wednesday. Okay, these are big stocks and big movers, and they will move the market and they will affect all of these names. So I would pay attention to that. Tesla, I find this amazing what it's doing right now. We've been waiting for 2 years for this to happen, 1.5 years, for us to finally break out of this DTL, this downward trend line, and now you can see it pretty clearly how that's happening. I think it's interesting that now's the time, and I guess I'm a little bit of a nerd, but I think it's interesting that it's happening now. The timing couldn't be worse, because I would definitely be more interested in being heavy in something like this if we didn't have earnings. I don't really want to buy this and come in and be down 10% in a day. It's not really my trading style. So I'm trading it. I have positions in it. We bought calls today. It did quite well with them. We traded the stock in and out a couple times. It's doing exceptionally well as far as a trading vehicle. I would like to build a position off this break. It's very difficult for me, the way that I trade, to just say, oh, I'm going to roll the dice and see how it goes during earnings. You have no idea what he's going to say. You have no idea what he's going to do. And that is a concern. And that brings me to the next concern that I have with Netflix. This was one that was just very difficult today. I tried to get a handle on, tried it a couple times, and it just kept entirely too volatile as far as the movements and the way that it moved. And I can kind of go through some of it, but what really struck me more than anything was you just kept flashing us out over and over again to clean it all off. You just kept over and over again. Every time you shouldn't have broke a lower low, you did. And then eventually you form this pattern where you work your way down and then you break out. And all right, so there is that breakout, these patterns, these, A, B, C, D patterns everybody likes, and then you break. I get it. I see it. My problem with that is you just don't know what you're going to get the next day. So it's hard to carry that into the next day. You carry that into the next day, and here we are where we have this, 5-minute doji, and we should blow this up. But here was the big issue for me with this. Here's that 5-minute doji, and then we're over, and then we collapse. And you try again, and you get over, and then we collapse. So it was very they made it very difficult to get in. And even when you got a close over the next bar, look at that bar. So now you're in up here and then you just drop $3. It's not for the faint of heart to try to get up and in this. The one spot to me that made the most sense that I would focus on is this 460 level, and you can see how we got through. Up, comes back down, tests, breaks out, tests again, sideways, and then it's gone. Somewhere in there you might have been able to look at it. But the question is, what are they going to do tomorrow? I don't have an answer. I mean, 510 seems pretty much like the area that I would be paying attention to. You should be able to get up to there before the quarter. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Maybe tomorrow we could push into that. You don't have any resistance in there right now. So that is a level that would make the most sense for us to test. I don't know what they're going to say about the actors strike. I don't know how they're going to handle that and future guidance. That is the one thing that has me most concerned now about that name. I'm sure a lot of people bought it because their subs are definitely going to increase. You can see the gap right here, and you can see the gap fill right there. Very similar to what happened with BBIO when you break through these gaps. The larger issue is what are we going to do about it? I'm not really sure how to play this, except that you day trade it during the day and then see if you can get up and in, if that's worth you holding overnight or into earnings. But you never know what you're going to get with this company. Never. I mean, you went home one night, you were feeling pretty good about yourself. I think we closed at 375. And then you woke up the next morning, you're at 250. That's not appealing to me at all. And it's not like it's happened once. It's happened up here, 509, and then the next day you're waking up and you're at 400. You just don't know. You're assuming it's going to continue this trajectory, but we really have no way of knowing. And I think that that's the important thing. Now, Meta, I thought this was kind of fascinating. I would have expected a larger push on this, but we really didn't get it. I thought that their partnership with Microsoft would have pushed more. We're going to see how that has to work out. I would say this. I would say the one thing that I do find concerning is that we had positive notes from Goldman, who pretty much is the axe, and a lot of institutions pay attention to what they say on SEDG, and it couldn't get out of its own way. They came out and added BIDU to the conviction list, and it didn't even lift. So when I start to see things like that, where you're getting positive news and you are seeing a negative response to that news, it does give you some pause. Now, we're not seeing that everywhere. We saw some upgrades on pins, and we can see how that just absolutely lifted and pushed. But we are seeing that. I do see Bitcoin rolling a bit. So I think we need to kind of see how these earnings, these big dogs, are going to come out. What's Netflix going to do tomorrow night? What's Tesla going to do tomorrow night? They're the big dogs, and that's what we need to watch. That's it.